how many different things can come up. Such a simple word, different experiences, connotations, and we'll explore that a little more after we sit. And the emphasis today, particularly just like finding a balanced effort in the meditation. I always say there's this balance between, on one end, having no effort at all can be a little too lax. The mind can kind of drift away. But if the effort is a little too tight, then the mind just wants to rebel against whatever's happening. So just something to reflect on and something that we'll explore in the meditation. So finding any way to sit that feels good for you. You can close your eyes or you can just rest your gaze on the floor in front of us here. And beginning with just simple intention that you've come this way, you've cleared out this time. So setting the intention to really just be here, to be present, but to also take off any pressure that the mind may want to put on what meditation means. And we could start with a few longer, slower, deeper breaths just to help the body arrive and to help the mind and the heart relax. So finding any way to breathe a little bit deeper that feels good for you. And whenever you feel ready, just letting the breath find a natural rhythm. Letting go of any control and just letting the body breathe however it wants to breathe. There's an incredible wisdom and capacity of the human body to self-regulate. So part of what we're doing in meditation is just kind of stepping out of the way and allowing the wisdom of the body, the wisdom of awareness to kind of work together and reset. Noticing how you know that you're breathing in a very simple way. And just letting the thinking mind continually fall to the background. Whenever it pops up, the instruction is simple, just to notice the mind is thinking, coming back to the body, to the breath. Easier to say, sometimes harder to do. And one way to find a softening in the mind is to soften the body. So starting at the top of the head, at the scalp, just releasing any holding or tension that may be there from the day. And same thing with the forehead and the eyes and the brain, the muscles of the thinking mind, just softening from the inside out. And allowing the jaw to relax. Just already noticing what this does to the breath, to the mind. And just checking the posture. Seeing if there's this kind of nice balance of being upright and relaxed. And letting the shoulder blades kind of come together on the back, opening up the chest a little bit. And feeling the weight of the arms and the hands. This gentle pull of gravity that's always there. Noticing the circulation of energy, blood flow through the arms, through the hands. Softening the chest, the front of the torso. Of allowing each breath to just massage and relax any holding or tension in the stomach or in the lower belly. Sensing into the contact points with the cushion, with the mat. Softening into the upper legs. Down through the knees and the lower legs. The calves, the shins. All the way through the feet and the bottom of the feet. And let's spend a minute here really with an emphasis on dropping the awareness, the attention into the lower half of the body, the legs, the contact points. Kind of visualizing any holding, any stress, just kind of melting down through the body, out through the legs, into the cushion, the floor, and the earth. And just bringing the awareness to the whole body, just in a relaxed way, from the top of the head to bottom of the feet. Noticing within this body where the breath is most prominent. And breathing in a way that helps the mind settle, feel comfortable. Really tuning into the quality of the mind right now. The awareness itself. The knowing, the simple knowing. Which doesn't need to be fabricated. already happening. So practicing mindfulness is tuning into something which is already there, recognizing that quality of presence of mind, and staying with it. Using the breath as a source of continuity, something that's shifting and changing, but also has a certain steadiness to it. And just noticing the first inclinations as the mind starts to wander off to something else. And then there's a simple release and return. Noticing the quality of the effort in the mind. Is there any pushing or striving? Or maybe the opposite. Is there any kind of just checking out? Or maybe it's really dialed in, balanced, present, but not pushing. Developing a wise effort involves uncovering what a sustainable effort is. Finding a way to practice meditation that feels easeful, patient, accepting, and kind. spend these last few minutes in silence. Just really tuning in, dialing in what a balanced effort feels like. May any goodness that comes from this practice be shared. Be shared with this community, with any beings, any living beings that are struggling. May it be for the welfare, for the benefit, for the sanity of all. May all beings be free. So thank you for your practice. I'm always pleased, delighted that folks want to just come here and sit on a Tuesday evening. So thank you. And I appreciate the presence and the group practice, always. So I'll share some thoughts, and then we'll have some more time for discussion. And the first thing coming to mind is obviously we're talking about bringing effort towards a meditation practice, but I think hopefully this can be applicable to all areas of life, whether it's work or relationships or passion projects. And I think effort can lead in a lot of different directions. I was reflecting on it before this thought and recognizing that I've put effort into a lot of things which have gotten me nowhere or even had the opposite effect. Substance use always comes to mind. So much effort put in purchasing something that's just making me sicker and sicker over time, but there's still effort there. And so to discover a way of putting forth effort, energy, through actions, through the heart, the mind that works, that kind of feeds back and nourishes the heart, something for me that brought me a great deal of joy. Finally discovering something in this life like meditation, a practice where it's like everything I've put into this in a way has come back to me. It hasn't been easy, but it's, I think for the most part, always been beneficial. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what are called the 4 great endeavors. There's always a list if you start coming here regularly. These are, pulled from early Buddhist teachings, and we're going through the Eightfold Path. And so this is one of the branches of the Eightfold Path, wise effort. And the 4 efforts that the Buddha taught were preventing the arising of unwholesome states in the mind. If unwholesome states, when they do arise, abandoning them. And then to arouse wholesome states, which may not have arisen yet, to cultivate what's wholesome. And then to maintain wholesome states once they do arise. So kind of simple, but we'll explore it a little bit. But I wanted to start, of course, just 2 things, kind of like ground rules for effort from Buddhist teachings, which is balance being the first, the key thing. The famous simile from the Buddhist teachings was he had a student who was a musician, and he was trying to teach this person about effort, and he was saying it's like tuning an instrument, like tuning a lute. If you tune it, or a guitar, whatever you want, pick your stringed instrument, since no one plays a lute probably. I don't know if I'm wrong. Tune it too tight, it's sharp, it's plingy. If it's too loose, it's the opposite, it's flat. And there's this nice middle ground for practice too. And this is what I was trying to kind of get to in the guided meditation. Just finding that way of kind of putting in an effort, but in a way that feels nice and relaxed and sustainable. And then the other aspect of effort, which is always important, is just an attitude of kindness, of compassion. I think effort can come from a lot of different places. But if mindfulness kind of becomes another thing that I should be doing, or, I messed up, or, it can just become like another added level of pressure in the mind. Okay, so to start, preventing the arising of unskillful states. I was reflecting on this one for a minute, and I was like, okay, how do I prevent the arising of unskillful states? And I read a lot of stuff from teachers. But one thing I wanted to share just from my own perspective is that I was like, this kind of sounds impossible because I can't really control what arises. But I can create an environment that is conducive to clarity in the mind. I can try to set myself up for success in various ways. So the first example that came to mind is that if I don't want to do heroin anymore, if I don't buy it, I probably won't do it if it's not in the house. If there's a drug or a substance, right, if I just don't take that step, it makes it so much easier. I mean, this can be applied to obviously a lot of other things than narcotics, if that doesn't apply to you in your past life. And then similarly, like if lethargy or tiredness leads me to being irritable or whatever comes along with that, angry, I can set myself up in a way through, just like basic sleep hygiene, things like that, trying to protect my sleep in a way, which can help prevent the arising of some of the states that go along with that. Or if loneliness, for example, leads to depression or to despair, proactively creating community. What we're doing here, for example, can help be a preventative measure to prevent some of those things from arising. So yeah. And then also, like, what kind of community, right? Like, I think it's another important question to ask. And does that mean at times that I actually need to cut people off to prevent some of those things from arising? Because those people may be triggering something in my mind. So just in general, creating a lifestyle, routines, things that kind of support clarity in the mind. And setting a firm determination, too, can be really helpful. This is something that we often do at the beginning of each meditation here, starting with the power of intention. Like, for these next 15 minutes, let me really set the intention to be here. Doing that regularly can really help the mind have some firmness to it. But it seems like no matter what, unskillful states will arise one way or another. Lack of sleep will happen, loneliness will happen at times. And as a result, irritability, depression, or despair, whatever your particular flavor is, will come up. I was reflecting on irritable, this word, and I think it's one of the most common things out there, actually. As a therapist, one of the things we have to do when you do a clinical note, there's a little drop-down menu, and you have to what was the mood of the client. And I've realized that irritable is kind of the most common one. One of the most common things that just kind of annoyed, a little irritated with how things are going. So this is where mindfulness can be really helpful. So recognizing when these things do arise, recognizing what's happening, and this is what we do in a meditation practice every time, recognizing when the mind is wandering off. Such a simple instruction, but can be so helpful. Because what happens in this moment of recognition, noticing when there's a mind state arising, whatever that, we can stick with irritation for this example. And in that moment, when the mind is aware of what's happening, it's not taking the hook. It's just knowing this is a thing that's arising in the mind. Doesn't have to take the train, doesn't have to get off the station. And so what can happen is there can be this kind of arising and then falling away of irritation or whatever it is. This is one of the first things I noticed in probably my first year of meditation was times, I think it was where I was taking public transportation a lot, and things where I used to really take this hook or start to get irritated, I could see it start to kind of come up and then kind of just fall away. So it wasn't like it was never coming up anymore, but I was recognizing my mind was developing some capacity to kind of let things start to roll off of it. And then the other thing that happens, without mindfulness, the mind tends to want to identify, particularly with difficult feelings, and it becomes, I am depressed, or I am hopeless, or I am this. But according to Buddhist wisdom, the true nature of any human being is none of those things, because all of these things are impermanent, they're shifting, and they're changing. So identifying with a particular mind state is reductive in a way. So the next one is arousing unarisen wholesome states. So this is why we're here, cultivating things like mindfulness, like compassion, like patience. And I know for myself, I can speak and say that mindfulness didn't necessarily come natural for me. I think identification with more unwholesome mind states came a little more naturally. And this took intentionality and takes practice, which is the value of having daily practice, meditating daily. So what are all, wholesome states to cultivate? Mindfulness, of course, being one of them, awareness, curiosity, being curious about what's happening, not always easy to do. I don't know about anyone else, but I feel like this is something that my therapist is always encouraging me to do at times when I really don't want to be doing it, just to be curious about what's happening. And I'm like, that's not what I want to do with that. I want to react to it. And then things like concentration, like tranquility, some of the calmness and the ease that I hope, you start to get a taste of in meditation. Learning to discover ways of having lightness, ease, and kind of like a natural high in the mind that can come through meditation. This is to be encouraged. And so why practice these? The idea is that over time, what are states, things that are temporary, can start to shift and become more traits. Mindfulness over time can become a trait quality. It can become the natural inclination of the mind. One of the most famous quotes from the suttas, whatever a person frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of their mind. So this is kind of 2,500 whatever years ago, but really recognizing the malleability of the mind. Whatever the mind is frequently reflecting on, over time this will become the inclination of the mind. And then finally, to maintain wholesome states that have arisen. And I wanted to read another little quote from the suttas here. It's always in this very serious, important sounding language. Herein the disciple rouses their will to maintain the wholesome things that have already arisen, not to allow them to disappear, but to bring them to growth, to maturity, and to the full perfection of development. So I just find that wording actually kind of beautiful and inspiring. And when I often, hear words like perfection or full development, I didn't grow up with that kind of languaging around things to cultivate in the mind. That was like maybe an art form or a musician or a craft or things that are mastered. But the idea of mastering a quality of like ease or kindness, something very different than what I was exposed to. And first hearing that kind of language, felt quite inspired by it. And, Buddhist nuns or monks who give up their lives to really practice and cultivate these things and teach them to others. So the idea here is to putting diligent effort into keeping these beautiful qualities of mind alive, practicing them, and that takes effort. For example, to maintain curiosity when I'm in conflict with somebody. Again, not my natural inclination is to be curious about what's happening in my own experience, like I want to be right. I don't want to be curious about what my mind is doing or how I may be distorting something. But those are some of the important times to try to really evoke and to call on those qualities when things are challenging. And naturally, practice will wax, will wane, will come, and will go. And I've definitely gone through, periods of my life where I felt very, very motivated, very inspired, and periods of my life where it's been challenging, when it's been harder to maintain and to keep that going. But I've realized that, for myself, I can't coast on retreats that I did 3 or 4 years ago, right? The momentum of that, can build the foundation of a practice, but I have to keep practicing. And honestly, it's something I've been struggling with a lot over this last winter, is maintaining some level of discipline with that. And it's part of why I'm definitely here. And I think this is also where balance and compassion come in again, not being hard on myself about it. I think diligence and trying to be diligent about something can easily turn into like an inner critic kind of a mindset, not mindful enough, not good enough, not doing this right. So as I was kind of trying to get at in the meditation, to find a way where it's really sustainable, requires patience, requires a balanced approach, and also bringing it off of the cushion, bringing it into everyday life. So to prevent the arising of unwholesome, unskillful states, abandoning, recognizing them when they arise, unskillful states, recognizing them, abandoning them through mindfulness, arousing wholesome states, practicing patience, practicing compassion, practicing kindness, and then maintaining them. And I'm just going to end, Tara Brach, one of the kind of more well-known insight meditation teachers. I was reading some of her reflections on balanced effort, and she says that at the heart of it, it's kindness towards oneself, and that growth comes from a gentle and a consistent practice. I really like that combination of words, gentle, consistent, rather than from harsh or self-criticism. And I think it's important because in the end, what voice am I really going to listen to? Do I want to listen to a self-critical voice or a harsh voice? To me, it's a lot easier to listen to a voice that's encouraging and that's kind and a lot more sustainable.